my lecture. I will start with a brief introduction of how this project came to be. I was invited to be a composer in residency in a forum program through Abeceda Institute. And in the forum I have started to develop, so to say, my solo disciplinarity and also to engage with what now I recognize as, let's say, my life project, what I want to dedicate my next 10, if not even 40 years to. And what I noticed in performance of new music is a lack of necessary skill set in order to perform pieces or learn them faster as I could. So if I trace back the lineage of, let's say, cellists from 18th century with Friedrich Dotzauer, Friedrich Kummer, David Popper, even Janos Starker, these were all people who composed, so aside of performing pieces of other composers, they all composed an immense opus for solo cello with études through which a student, when encountered with these pieces or when a student learns these pieces, acquires a necessary skill set that enables him to perform music of his time. Now what I noticed, these études end at a certain point. We have nowadays in 20th century maybe Siegfried Palm's studies for Neue Musik, Sofía Gubaidulina études, and Ellen Fallowfield with her cello map, but that's as far as I could trace. And that's one of the reasons why I started with this project. Possible études for impossible time, apart from simple wordplay or play with words. Why I named them études is because they are not simple exercises. I still aim to derive material from music first, so they also have an aesthetical value. They are pieces that can be put on stage and that put music in a primary position. For impossible times, it's exactly for the fact that I mentioned earlier, the fact that one is faced, at least I was faced with a challenge of difficulty of having a necessary or matching skill set for performance of new music. At this point, I was reading a book, pedagogical book of William Bled, a cello professor, and I was pretty fascinated by his words, how the music is the vehicle of technique and not vice versa. So once we are hitched onto the musical and spiritual momentum of a piece of music and use it as a vehicle to lift our technique and carry it into new realms, the possibilities for technical development and progress become endless. I have started these études with improvisation, and I will play for you some of my first results, and just to give you a brief overview of what was the material that I worked with. Method was to simply engage with them every day with these improvisations and to start searching for what is the core of each composition, what is the main musical material, core, character, what techniques are possible with it. And then I started also notating and comparing what is the difference if I perform the pieces blank without any score or when I study the score. And I observed that when transcribing the pieces and then learning them through score, there is a certain magic that is gone. There is a certain freedom that I have that is gone when playing the pieces through the score. So this is a still undiscovered territory for me, which I still need to find out how to proceed with it. But I want to play now for you one of the études performed last year on the Abeceda festival. And I will show you the transcription of it. Yes. So at the moment I'm in the stage of transcribing all of the pieces, and on one hand this is a great ear training exercise for me to really recognize in details all the nuances that are present in the pieces, and on the other hand to see what could be the most fitable notation for it, and the most important one, to recognize what is an actual core or essence of each of the études. And what is one of my goals is to carry these études then on to students of new music, to give them opportunity to just engage with something that is maybe unfamiliar to them, and to also insert an element of freedom and a curious search for innovative practice in their performance. So I aim to not have a strict form or really preset notation, but actually just encompassing the whole core of the compositions in a score, whatever that would be, that would enable each of students of these études to find their own authentic way how to approach and explore the instrument, since it is an instrument that still has a lot of possibilities to offer. And also one important aspect that I aim for is to kind of come ahead of the composers, so it's a really future-looking project. So to have a skill set that will be able to perform the music that is going to be composed in the future, on one hand, and on the other hand also to inspire composers or give them ideas even. At this point, that's it for my theoretical part. I would love to play for you 4 of the études really briefly. Thank you. And then we can proceed to questions. forgot something, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I'd like to ask you something. Are you familiar with when you were naming the composers from the 17th, 18th, we start with the 18th century. But if you're familiar with the work of Charles Curtis as a cellist and his kind of alternative way to use the instrument, the cello, towards the new complexity?
No, I'm not
You know.
familiar. Yes.
Then I suggest.
But thank you.
Because
thank
he has a very interesting opinion about
Thank you for
the way the new
reference.
complexity music is going and the way that he used improvisation and how he formalized also his scores. Anyone else?
Yeah, in general, I'm sure there are many more cellists and musicians that engage with similar.
He was working a lot with altitudes, and then he started to do his own.
Yes, yeah. And my main point is that in the past, it was almost, as far as my research goes, almost every performer has had an immense opus of their own studies and studies for acquiring skill set, like compositions, which nowadays I recognize is lacking a little bit. Yes.
I have one question. Congratulations, Urban. The objective of the transcription by now is like communicating that to other performers. Do you also plan like to use this material to do another pieces or I don't know, for a full string quartet, for example? Or have you already done that? Maybe yes.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, the objective on one hand, so primary, the objective of transcribing is to have a deep analysis or listening of what I have produced and to recognize what I have produced. And on the one hand is like you mentioned, to pass on to other performers. And yes, anyway, what these études are also, what I recognize is I didn't invent any of this. It has been invented by all the tradition that has come before me, by all the compositions that I have played in my life. And then it's just a merge of all the possibilities that I know I have available, but also aim to generate new material through this. And I'm using, of course, also this material in the string quartet that you will hear tomorrow, for example. Except that there the aim is not, it's not for pedagogical purpose or, yeah, my other compositions, they're purely more in the artistic direction, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to clarify, so this is online now. This will be
This is private.
Oh, this is private.
Yeah.
Because so I saw your performance last year, and already I thought, well, you know, it would be great, and as you mentioned, to have Orban in my living room, basically, to see how he performs that, you know, and to get the idea of the techniques. And so just to, I think you mentioned that to bring that out explicitly. So you say this could be also available to composers because it's really interesting to see what you get out of the instrument and what the possibilities are, and to have this as inspiration. So is that something that you like or don't like so much and think, oh, maybe not, that's not the idea of that really?
Yes, thank you for the question. So if you're asking about the video, it's on YouTube, so it's accessible. And what you do with it, since it's public, is basically up to you. Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your relationship to virtuosity, because a lot of the names that you've suggested, I'm not familiar with the cello repertoire as such, but I guess they're in a similar vein to those kind of performer composers like Paganini, Liszt, Chopin, where a lot of the focus is on like extreme virtuosity in a lot of those études. Is that something you're consciously working with in your own, or do you take a slightly different approach?
Yes. I see virtuosity as virtuosity is generated when there is a certain conflict present between a composition, like material, musical material, and the skill set of a performer. And when, at least in my practice, when I'm faced with something challenging, I have to engage with innovative approach that would bring me to another level of performance. And this I see as virtuosity, then reducing or even totally diminishing this conflict to then perform once something that was once impossible to perform is that at certain point really easy or involving zero effort. Yes.
The last question.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the what you mean with the impossible times.
As I said in the beginning, this was just a play with words. So
Yeah,
I would like to
but
keep it at that.
maybe you can. You're such a good improviser. Maybe you can improvise a little bit.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I will. So yes, but since the title has stick with the compositions a lot, impossible times I recognized could also refer to a traditional material that I'm familiar with, but is put into a time frame that makes the material impossible to perform. And this triggers then this search for how can one make it possible. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
I see we have a
But
couple
I
more
don't
minutes.
relate to impossible times as to the times that we live in. I think it's wonderful times that we live in. Yeah. Yes.
We have a couple more minutes, so if there's any other questions, there is a space for that. No? Then thank you, Urban. Maybe?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll take 2, 3, 4 minutes to reconfigure the tech, and we'll continue with
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me here. Well, today the lecture I'm gonna show you, it's about composition of time. And first of all, I want to just open with these questions. Like, I don't have an answer right now, but just for you to invite you to think about it. What is time in music? Do we compose time? How do we compose time? Well, first I'm gonna quote a couple of quotations of Octavio Paz, that he's a very profound poet, writer from Mexico. Here is the Spanish version for the Spanish speakers, but I'm gonna read the translation in English. Time is the illusion with which we force the perennial and infinite reality. In such a short period, we pinhole the essence of being, which does not wither. The second one, for as soon as time is divided into yesterday, today, and tomorrow, into hours, minutes, and seconds, man ceases to be one with time. He ceases to coincide with the flow of reality. So, in general, I think time is something that it's concerning us as human beings in general. And these notions of time that at least I can really relate, it's this idea of the time as a human expression, or how we perceive reality and we organize it. So there is this notion of time of Martin Heidegger that is, well, temporality is like an a priori transcendental condition from which the creation of meaning, intelligibility, and understanding of being is possible. Being is always intelligible only in terms of time. So in that sense, the perception of time, it's a deeply human experience in which we deal with a continuous past, with a present that it's always disappearing, and, well, an uncertain future. And I think that we have these multiple possibilities of creating meanings. But we also, as human beings, it's like impossible also to really try to comprehend the total phenomena of what it's time. So, but time contents our existence as human beings. So if we have that possibility, then art can be expressed in time too. And well, there it comes. What's time in music? Well, music is expressed in time. The first slide you saw, there was this brilliant painting of Salvador Dalí, and we could just observe the painting and have everything in one shot. So unlike a sculpture or painting, music and poetry, for example, exists in space, exists in time. So as it is taking place there, the perception of music will be this kind of complex cognitive process in which we're employing the ability to create temporality in order to make a structure or order in architectural meanings, a sequence of sounds in different successions. So yes, as I said, music is expressed in time, and this composition of time, I've just organized it like in 4 elements, which I considered very important. First, conceiving time as a primary element in music. We have pitch, we have rhythm, etc. But time, it's a fundamental element for constructing the musical discourse. in a way that different events can appear, disappear, reappear in a time frame, in a timeline, affecting our perception of sound. There is one very interesting paper of, let me see. Yes, of Maya Carilla, and she talks about the concept of absolute time and relative time, which for me it's like very interesting. She said that this objective time in musical composition especially, it's the time that is defined, you know? We can express it by the size, we can express it in size by the properties, the values, the symbols of the musical elements. We have the notation as a way to try to put in paper this time organization, I mean, in metrics, in beats, etc. But we also have the subjective time, which can also be described as a psychological experience, and how time passes in performer's mind, for example, or how the performance is perceived by public. So this is like two forces that I find like really fascinating to start exploring in. And yes, then we can talk about time, about a really important element to create a structure. As we said, this is a representation of a temporal organization, will depend on understanding also these structural properties of a musical form and how we can put in time the elements, as I said before, and that listeners will perceive this time in a span and will create an image from that. So we'll have this active structural part that will guide the listeners from one motive to other motive, from one element to another one, from one phrase, one idea, one subject matter to another one. And we're creating a building, a house. So for me, it's like very interesting to see and just focus on time. Just to do this quicker, there are different ways of managing the elements in time. We have the rhythmic structure, we have a metrical structure, we have a temporal structure of segments, and this is all about also organization of the tempo, for example. Now I want to talk about something that for me it's very important, that in the history we have had very well-known musical forms that had created structure. And for me, the fugue, and for I think everyone here, is one of the marvelous examples in which we can see the powerful infrastructure that is used in this framework to create different actions. We can see that with a theme that it's like a very tiny element, we can create a, well, we know Bach, for example, created such a marvelous work. So for me, this is very inspiring still. And today I'm going to talk about the piece. Just before that, for example, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the presentation of the piece that I've written for this marvelous quartet. Fugue is this step. It's like a musical maze where themes intertwine harmoniously. It's a picture, a dialogue of voices waving melodies into a captivating tapestry. So, yeah, for me this is very powerful. And in terms of structure, we have an exposition, we have the episodes, when you can pick the theme or the answer or the counter subject and play with it. And this management of the elements, it's what, well, makes a fugue, and also some harmonic rules in there. But for me, what was inspiring about using the basis of the fugue as not only as a form, but as a way to create an infrastructure for players to framework their elements, the things that will happen in the piece. So the piece is called Estudios sobre el Tiempo, that is Studies on Time, written for a string quartet. And in this piece, you will perceive different elements throughout different agents that time will be destroying in a way when the main theme, the subject, we can say, stops being the center of the attention. And these subsequent appearances of the subject can maybe be perceived as a reminiscence of that. And with this, we can also talk about the memory, which is quite an important element for us as human beings to capture that moment, to go back or project it in the future. So in this particular piece, well, I am not like really trying to make a fugue, but as I told you, it's the essence. So we have this first subject, we'll say, that will be appearing in each of the instruments, which is like the traditional way of doing it in a fugue. Then, as we know in the fugue structure, then you're gonna have an answer of a second voice, while this subject will then go to kind of a counter subject. And we're gonna now hear an example with the string quartet about the first 2 pages of the piece, which is basically the presentation of the subject, and then how it goes through different voices. And yes, it's better to listen. So guys, whenever you're ready. Well, as you could hear, there's this main subject that is going through all of the agents. And as it is passing through, then, well, there's this other, like, very little noisy sound, and then we're gonna keep developing on it. And what is very important is, like, trying always to feel these planes, you know, how a reality can pass through these different agents. So, well, this is try to do like a kind of a strict way of the fugue, you know, it's like the more traditional part. Then we're gonna play an excerpt of what we can say first episode, in which, as we know in the episodes, we take materials or basic elements from the subject, and then you just do the variations you want. And in this particular piece, there are some moments in which this remembrance or this reminiscences of the subject, it's going to be captured, but not at all. I mean, performers also have the freedom to do it in the speed they can choose, in the moment of time that can happen. Also, for example, I don't know if there's a pointer. No, okay, doesn't matter. When we have just the essence of the theme. So for me, what is also interesting is seeing how this theme can be in a way erased by the memory in some points and then create these possibilities, for example, of kind of free polyrhythms or free transpositions that can happen. For example, in minute 3:05, you will hear just the contour of the line that will be played by the cello, and that it will start doing this unspeculated counterpoint with the other voices. So yes, we're going to play the second part, please. Yes, for example, we can create these possibilities of dialogues between the instruments. For example, in minute 3:35, we have this ghost of the subject in the first violin, and also the contour, the melodic contour in the cello. And what is happening right here is something that me as a composer, I cannot have the control, because yeah, it's like the possibilities also of this kind of opened way of writing to let this happen. The third excerpt that I'm gonna show to you it's what we can say a certain development of the counter subject that in the first part was really, really subtle in the first violin with this airy, noisy sounds. And in this fragment of the piece, it's gonna take the protagonism, and we can see how the theme can also be embedded in the counter subject, but also this counter subject will then capture and take the control of all of the texture of the piece, of the fragment, sorry. So we're gonna hear the third excerpt. Yeah, so as you could hear, it definitely eaten the theme, and well, in the whole piece, maybe you're gonna feel much more better why it is put in this particular part of the piece. And well, the last part will be kind of a second episode in which we start with this cello solo opened version of the theme. And we won't play this part today. You will hear it in the concert. But, but then after this solo will come what is, for me, the most lovable part of a fugue, that it's the stretto. When everything just meld together, they're like running, rushing one against the other one. So, well, we're gonna hear a kind of a stretto that starts in 6:45, it's just before that. So, yes, so for you to be aware of the 6:45, not the beginning of the page, yes. Mm-hmm. yes, so for me it's like really exciting, these possibilities of playfulness that this very well-known technique can create in this particular moment of the piece. So for me, what is interesting in general is what we're capturing in a particular time, in this moment that we're right now, right here. And I'll put the last picture. How time is constantly melting, it's running away from our hands. And, well, this is the very first piece of what I call Estudios del Tiempo, but I'm really looking forward to keep searching in that direction, to create this kind of frameworks in which we can create possibilities of reality that can occur in their different agents. Yes, so thank you very much for listening. And
If there are any questions, yes?
Hi, really fascinating talk. We share a lot of very close interests, I think, because I'm also doing a talk on time tomorrow and polyphony and counterpoint. And I thought it was really interesting that you decided to explore this with a fugue because it is so like tightly controlled in time. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about why. So, like, can you go back to just one of the score
definitely,
images?
yes.
So there's this timeline, this timeline here where everything is still very kind of discrete and striated, so each page lasting a minute and being split into these 5-second boxes. So we still have a very linear idea of time. Was that something you were like really conscious to keep a hold of, or something that you want to sort of move away from in the future, or do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, actually this was like a first wondering about, okay, I want this to last 8 minutes. I'm doing this like very metrical. But then I was also concerning about this would be possible. And in the first rehearsal we had, I was not planning to ask the question about putting a metronome. But they told me, we're gonna do it without a metronome. And I think that this, right now, and how is going through, and I think that it's really a very good solution, is thinking also these minutes as something relative. So they are not counting, they are just letting time flow through it. So it's kind of a proportion. It's a, yes, it's a proposition of timing, of things that will happen in some specific moment, but it's not the time that we have in our clocks.
Yes, yeah. So I'm just curious, maybe for the ensemble, just what do you have in front of you? Are you reading off scores? Are you trying to keep your own sense of time, or are you basing it off cues from the other parts? How does time work for you in this scenario?
We are playing from the full score, and we're playing from the full score, and we're basing the timeline off of the cues because we're following what other people are doing. I don't think any one of us is particularly counting the seconds. And we did try in the rehearsal process. We tried using a timer, and it just sort of killed the spirit, the openness. So we found it much better. Yeah.
There is seconds in this piece. For me, they just serve as a basis of, let's say, pulse or time. So for me, they're always running in the back, but it really depends on the material on the page. These seconds are changing from bar to bar. So sometimes they get longer, they get shorter. Yeah.
Just one thing about that, and also for me was like interest to erase these things like, okay, so we have to all be in a beat and let the coincidences happen. I mean, when it needs to be there, when it's needed. Sorry. Yes.
Can I have one quick follow-up?
Yes, definitely.
So just if you were to have a repeat performance of this, would you consider taking out the dotted bar lines and just leaving page by page and allowing the musicians more freedom to move through it? Because it sounds like that's kind of what you've arrived at anyway.
No, I think I won't take it. I will put just like seconds are relative. Time is relative, point. That's it. Yes.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. It was really fascinating. I kind of just wanted to ask in two parts, really. First, I just wanted to ask, have you come across the music and writings of Bryn Harrison?
No, I would love to.
He's well worth reading because he's dealing with a lot of the things you're dealing with as well. His music sounds completely different to yours, but his writings about time and organisation and repetition of time and pause time as well is really fascinating. So his PhD thesis is available on his website, so it's well worth looking at.
Look for it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Bryn Harrison. I wanted to ask you a question about because you talk about time here kind of formally in terms of the form. Have you got any plans to look at it in a more kind of localised way?
What do you mean?
So looking at time in terms of rhythm, in terms of meter for each musician, so just taking how a performer interprets the localized time, so the kind of metrical time of a piece as opposed to the whole formal structure of time. So that could be, I just take an example, say, for the new complexity, how performers interpret lots and lots of irrational tuplets. That is interpreting something in terms of individual time.
Yes.
In a more localized way than looking at it in a formal way. So do you have any plans of looking kind of more localized, kind of on the smaller scale as opposed to the larger scale?
I think that these Estudios del Tiempo, studies on time, is I will consider as like my study portfolio. Maybe one of the first. I've been like all my life doing more artistic thing, but I think the possibilities of studying is searching for these other possibilities. So this is not the only one, and I'm looking forward to just keep searching. Thank you for sharing.
Cheers.
Anybody else? Last question?
Thank you. Yeah, this is lovely. I'd like to ask about kind of performance practice with some of the notation, particularly some of the visuals with regard to the circles and the speed of each circle. Like, is there a certain I guess in the performance process, what was it like for you determining like speed of the circular bowing and like how does this expressive element change the way you maybe shape a certain phrase or a moment, you know, because the very long change from molto sul tasto to molto sul pont is beautiful and wonderful on those high harmonics, but that's also quite a different feeling and sensation from a very quick change. And so the like logic of how you decide what to use where, you know?
So who want to? Okay. Yes, I mean, actually, there's a kind of poetical thing about this circular thing. I mean, it's like time, you know? Sometimes you can hear, for example, a piece that it's like 30 minutes piece, but the subjective time can be one, you know, that passes really quick. So it's about also this perception. So playing or putting this single material like the circular bowing can bring you different possibilities, and it's a subtle variation, I think so, because it's a timbrical variation. And yes, it's also this graphics. Yeah, here it's about this speed that you're trying to go up or down, but it's not totally controlled. It will be what it will happen. Yeah.
But I think where your question, I think where your question might have been getting at is that there are actually two different notations for that. I think if you look at 645, right, there's the little swirls. Those are supposed to be multiple circles of undetermined speed, and the other one is one single big slow circle. So it's not indeterminate, if that's what you were asking. It's quite clearly written when is it a slow one and when it's the repeating pattern. Yeah.
Follow up? All right, I think we can conclude due
Yes.
to time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
How ironic we have to.
Julius, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so welcome to my presentation. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for listening. In my presentation, I will talk about a tendency that I observed in my recent composition, which was to melt vocal and instrumental sounds, which I call now the vocal instrumental chimera. And today I would like to talk about some techniques, some compositional ideas, which I've come up with in the last few years to trying to melt these sounds, trying, as I said, adding instrumental qualities to the voice, using the voice as an instrument, and on the other hand, using like the vocal characters of some instruments, on the other hand, to blend these two colors. And yeah, for that I mostly avoided using text. I also semantics, because I noticed that in many pieces this makes you your brain process the information in the other part of your brain. So if you're listening to music, it's in one part, and understanding speech is in another part. So if you listen to pieces with speech, I guess it's your brain is always a bit like changing between these parts somehow. And when I'm not using text at all, I try to like focus on the part of the brain which is normally used to process music. Also, this mixture between instruments and voices can create an ambiguous space for the listener, because on the one hand, you might not be sure if it's instruments or voices. You can discover these different in-between situations between vocal or instruments. Yeah, my motivation behind this is that I'm basically interested in thinking in sound, in music as itself, like in music as an abstract and expressive medium, not having music so much to directly communicate with other people in communicating things of the outside world, but rather using music as a non-relational medium, which is not connected to like the outside world, in that sense that it refers to current political or social situations. I say if I want to do this, I can do this outside music. I can like position myself in interviews or anything as I want, but I don't have to do this in my music, because I feel that music often blurs this kind of communication, and I prefer to then communicate directly and not through music. There are other positions which I also admire, but for me, I found out that this is what interests me most. And so, but every listener is free to associate everything he or she might associate with the music. And so if you want to interpret it as a certain social or political related piece, you can do that for your own, and it's your own interpretation. Everybody's completely free to do that. But for my own, I'm not indicating this directly in the pieces. So I would like to present some general techniques which I developed to melt these vocal and instrumental sounds. First of all, maybe a very obvious thing is to balance the volume between the instruments and the voices, so that it's not what is often done in recordings, that the voice is so much in the foreground, as it's like a piece for voice and accompaniment, and trying to balance the volume, that the voice is not above the other instruments is one thing, and I will present a piece about that. Then spectral harmony as a way to melt different instruments and sounds, to merge them, and using one as an overtone maybe of the other, etc. Then matching vowel colors, I will talk about that later. And also using the consonants and noises you can produce with a voice to melt with instrumental sounds, instrumental noises. Then there are, especially for wind instruments, different degrees of simultaneously singing and playing. I will talk about that. And as a last point, I will talk about overtone singing, whistling, and vocal fry as some extended techniques, and how they can be used to create transitions from instrumental sounds to vocal sounds. And as you can see here on the left side, this idea of a melted chimera or anything between human and instrument is not a new thing. There's like the ornamentation there, and maybe it's an indication that there was ideas of connections earlier or whatever. So as a first example, I would like to present a really short moment of a piece which I wrote last year. It's for flugelhorn, double bass, and hidden soprano. So the public doesn't know anything about the soprano. It's not written in the program, it's not written anywhere, but it mixes really softly behind the stage in the sound that you cannot really notice that it's there, but sometimes there is this moment of irritation where you think, oh, is there maybe something more? Are the players singing, or how's the sound produced? And yeah, this really interested me in that piece. And also it's using a lot of spectral harmony to use the voice as an overtone of the double bass or anything, to melt these sounds. And here's a really short example of this. Another part of the piece was my interest in matching the vowel colors between the flugelhorn, using, for example, a wah-wah mute. The name of the wah-wah mute already says what it does. It's like filtering somehow vowels that it sounds like wah, 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 which is like something you would normally produce with voice. So wah-wah is like a vocal instrumentation of what the mute does. And like a lot of instruments have these very specific formants. There are a lot of analysis how they sound and which like parts of the frequency spectrum are more dominant in these instruments. And so taking a look at these analyses and also about your own notion. My own notion when I was listening to the instruments was an idea for melting the sounds here. And this is another example where you can see the trumpet, or in this case, flugelhorn, is playing with this plunger mute in that case, which does a similar thing. And then we have these imitations in the soprano, also with these vowel transitions, but you cannot really notice it because it's really far away. And later in the piece, I will play with like the foreground and background of these vowels in soprano and flugelhorn. Oh, this was not intentionally. Yeah, so this were the performers. Just to mention them, you can see the soprano sitting here behind the stage, Marlene Walter, and us playing in the foreground, and she was like behind there. Yeah, so another field of interest was using consonants as noise producers, and I noticed that specific consonants merge easily with noise produced by instruments. For example, in this piece, which I wrote also last year, I'm using a lot of consonants like sh or sh in combinations with different vowels. For example, if you do sh with a U inside your mouth, you get like, and if you change then to E, you get like, and these is like a bit of a pitch transition there, like this glissando, and you can imitate in instruments or use this to merge these different sounds. And I also used other consonants, fast rows of consonants to create these fast noisy textures which resemble a bit to tremolo and which are connected also rhythmically to, for example, here if you can see, this is soprano doing, and then we have picking in the electric guitar, some tremolo in the, but controlled tremolo with controlled tempo in the violin and double tonguing in the flute. And so all these little repetitions and little elements of noise match there quite well. Yeah, and you were listening to Johanna Vargas from Neue Vokalsolisten and Ensemble Musikfabrik under the direction of Angus Lee. Just to mention the performers. Yeah, another idea what you maybe also noticed in this little part already is these different degrees of playing and singing. So, for example, for wind instruments, you can have ordinario playing, then you can have playing and singing. You can have singing through the instrument, or you can have, singing humming without the instrument, as well as, normal singing. And you can see here what AI made of this. It's getting really crazy, maybe as crazy as the piece which I will show next. It's Monolith 1 for ensemble. And yeah, there are a lot of wind instruments and brass, so there are like many ways to find these in-between spaces between instrumental and vocal sounds. And I will play a short video of that, where I marked these different strategies. I think the quality will get better in a second. You have singing and playing, you have only singing into an instrument, and then you have whistling, which is also a kind of vocal creation of sounds. Yeah, as you can also see, we have this idea again that there is the noise. So noise sounds in the instruments, also with indication of specific kind of consonants. And then we have here, for example, this is electric guitar, and here electric bass, these controls of an EQ, which will also create the kind of form and shifting. Okay, you were listening to Orchestre Preis, and the conductor was Gregory Jarrett. Okay, there's another piece I would like to present, which you already listened to, like in the part, and this is again this piece. We have in this piece also in the soprano part these party pipes, and used alongside with singing. And yeah, because I felt like I wanted to have more than just a normal soprano singing, and like if a singer is really free to do anything with their hands. And on the other hand, we have humming instrument players, so the soprano becomes a bit of an instrument player, and the instrumentalists have to sing. So everybody has like multiple and hybrid function. And yeah, this was to create these smooth transitions between the vocal and instrumental sounds. And here I can show you a little reel from Instagram where I showed how I built these party pipes, because it's a special way of using multiple of these pipes inside one of each other, and then you can get like really crazy beatings, and yeah, so have fun. That's it. And this is also what the singer had to do. You can see, for example, here, one of these notes is for the party pipe and the other one is singing, so we get this noisy stuff. And then in the other instruments we have similar strategies. Here, for example, in the flute, it's also singing and playing the same, almost the same note to get these little beatings, and we have these small clusters in other instruments as well. And then we have these special steps here for the vocalized parts in the instruments. So I'll play a bit of that. Yeah, so far so good. Okay, let's come to the last chapter, which is overtone singing, whistling, and vocal fry. And this was a thing that I did in my really recent piece. And yeah, so overtone singing is basically just using really special vowels to filter out specific overtones, fitting different vocal resonances onto each other to get them, yeah, making them stronger each. So it sounds like singing two voices at the same time, where the upper voice has this instrumental quality, like a flute almost, and the ground voice is more vocal. And so this is, of course, a nice thing to blend with different instruments, for example, yeah, flutes and other instruments. And I use this a lot in my recent composition, Was wir nicht wissen, means in English, what we don't know, for overtone singers, choir, orchestra, and electronics. So one technique which I used there was creating an instrumental imitation of the overtone singing by copying these two lines, or also like creating artificial instrumental reverb by delaying the sounds the overtone singer produced there. And the choir itself becomes a really instrumental sound carpet with almost not recognizable vowels and no text, really stable, like maybe we could imagine other instruments do more like, yeah, this carpet. So here's a short example. This is just the solo part of the overtone singer there, and there's orchestra as well, but the score was too big for the presentation. Another idea was using this kind of vocal fry alongside with overtone techniques and a self-built electronic percussion instrument made out of this corrugated tube. And if you use a percussion stick to stroke it, you get like also these granulated sounds. And then we have, to imitate these vocal glissandos, we have overtone glissandos in the strings, for example, and then the choir also gets short parts of this corrugated tube, and if you blow it, you get these overtone glissandos as well. So here's a little example of the piece where you can listen to these different layers in the orchestra. There's this overtone singing, then there's a lot of these structures where the overtones are imitated in other instruments using these corrugated tubes, using singing and whistling at the same time, and also using pure instrumental sounds, using harmonics in the strings. And there's also a solo part in a choir where you can listen to like a choir doing overtone singing. I think it's quite impressive. Like this is the choir of the university in Dresden, and they learned it in half a year. So I hope you enjoy. Yeah, and so this was Wolfgang Saus who had the solo at the end, and some students from university in Dresden where I'm studying, and they also learned this overtone singing quite fast, and he was their teacher. Then we had the choir, which I already mentioned. Sinfonietta Dresden was the orchestra, and Olaf Katzer, conductor. And if you want to listen to the whole piece, it's on YouTube. Yeah, it's like 25 minutes. Okay, so thank you for listening, and yeah.
We've got about 10 minutes for questions. Anybody has a question?
Thank you. That's some astonishingly beautiful music. So thanks for sharing that with us. And it's interesting that in some ways there's an overlap with, I think, some of the stuff that Ingrid was talking about a few days ago, with this kind of chimera element between instrument and voice. I'm curious about your decision around text and semantics and avoiding that, because it seems like it works very effectively in the voices, because you're removing that sort of identifiable human element for them. So I think that works really effectively in terms of turning them into instrumental things. Sometimes I think it's so well that it becomes impossible to distinguish them from the ensemble. So my question is whether you work at all with text as a structural tool for the instrumental parts. So essentially that using the instrumental, the instruments to imitate more identifiable vocal or semantic things in order to make them always more vocal than the vocalists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It's a good idea, I think. I didn't think of that until now, but yeah, in a recent piece which I did for electronics, I tried to, it was like based on a piece for violin and percussion, and I tried to manipulate the sounds of violin and percussion so that I get a singer at the end. And I tried a lot with different form and shifters and using percussive sounds as consonants and stuff. But in the end, I sent it to some friends, the result, and nobody could understand the text. But yeah, that's a great impulse, I think.
Have you worked at all with cross synthesis in electronics, kind of using like amplitude and frequency manipulation?
Yeah, I mean, in this specific experiment, I tried to use amplitude following for amplitude, of course, and I had some overpressure sounds on violin to have a big spectrum out of which I could filter out these like formants, and then I did also pitch tracking, yes, for the pitch, but I did it manually most of all. But I think the main problem was that the vocals didn't sound that convincing, and also a lot of the consonants. I tried a lot with like cutting these sounds and EQing them and trying to pitch shift them on the right part of the spectrum for like this kind of stuff. But in the end, it didn't sound like I wanted. So, but maybe there are better solutions than my like amateur trying.
So do you know what vocoding is? Have you come across vocoding? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds very similar with what you're trying to do there with like how vocoders work.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Hi. Thank you for sharing your music. I'm curious about if any perhaps influences or relationship between language, and by language I mean like the sonic materials of language on the music, especially since, you know, thinking of like the music and the attention, the differences between the sounds of like English and German and French and of the different languages in different contexts. Yeah, I'd just love to hear a bit.
Yeah, that's also a nice impulse. Thank you. In these pieces, I didn't think so much of it because it's mostly based, maybe because I'm instrumentalist and not singer, but it's mostly based from that approach that I try to make the singers become more instrumental. And then the only thing I do with the instrumentalist is to make them like sing into the instruments and that kind, making the instruments sound more vocal. So that could be also an interesting approach for further compositions, I think. Especially, we had a nice seminar at our university where a person talked about the influence of speech on instrumentation for like early music. That in French there's a lot of oboe and bassoon and specific combinations, which sounds a bit like the language, and so these like things which are really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a topic you could dive into for forever. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, it's just a beautiful ethereality, especially to the last piece, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, just kind of following on from that, I was just about to ask about the early music relationship with that. Being an early music guy myself, really, I just wanted to ask about the kind of swapping the roles. You mentioned making singers into instruments. What would happen if you make the instruments into singers? So they're kind of looking at the prosodic elements of language, so the actual blending of sounds of a text and using that as a starting point. So it's kind of swapping. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like kind of mumbling on now, but it just kind of struck me that it would be an interesting approach. I think the kind of swapping of so instruments as singers as opposed to singers as instruments. Would that be something you'd be interested in trying or not?
Yeah, that's. I mean, the thing is why I didn't do it until now is that I was not interested in having a specific text, so I was always struggling with which kind of text should I choose, and I always when I did this this experiment with electronics, I was like just using a dummy text because I didn't want to have some of these outer music meanings in there, and so if I were to try this, in the end I would have to work on myself and my concept of music before to be able to use text in any way in my music.
But nobody needs to know about it.
Yeah, that's true, but
Only
if
you.
it's so well done that you can understand it, I mean...
Yeah. It reminds me of the Clarence Barlow piece, isn't there? I don't know if you've come across him. I think he passed away. Do you know Clarence Barlow? Clarence Barlow? No. He passed away, I think, about 2 years ago, but he did this in a piece where he claimed that he blended the sound so correctly of a text that anybody could tell what the string quartet were playing. People would be able to recite the text the string quartet was playing. Nobody's managed to do it, so yeah. But Clarence Barlow claimed to be able to do that, but he couldn't.
I mean, there's also a piece by Peter Ablinger with speaking piano.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But to be honest, I could also not understand the text when I didn't see the subtitles. But I saw it first time with subtitles, so this chance was gone, but I think I could.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then, thank you, Julius.
Yeah, thanks for your attention.